He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
We were breaking ground, we were making history, we were going somewhere, and we played our first test match against Australia. Oh, I could have jumped up and grabbed the moon, actually, but...
Hi, I'm Jesse Mulligan, and in this episode of Sports History NZ, we meet a genuine legend. For years, Dame Lois Muir was the face of New Zealand netball, coaching our national team to multiple world champs. But if you weren't around in the 1960s, you might not realise that she also played for the Silver Ferns, known as the team's star defender. So where did her passion for netball come from? Well, her sporting career began in a tiny school way down the bottom of the South Island.
Oh, it was good stuff. I was a country kid, school teams and, playing into school stuff, country kid, and great, and got looked at and managed to be seen, yeah.
What was the school?
Matara. Yeah.
Cool, way down.
John Nesby made famous with the scourer from Matara, but yeah. Mm.
You loved it, but you love basketball too, eh?
Oh, yes, I was really fortunate. Basketball, well, I played for New Zealand as well, and I toured Australia with the first New Zealand women's basketball team that had ever toured in 1958, so that dates me a little bit. But I was fortunate because my sister went to Teachers College in Dunedin, and then she came back on section teaching at Matara, and she was playing basketball, and their team was always short. And we managed to bully my mother into letting me go and fill in. I was still at primary school, a little bit of a horror probably. But, I thought it was marvellous. I had a bike, of course, and get on my bike and bike down the road and then stop. And in those days, there was a thing called Tangy Natural Lipstick. It was a little black container with orangey lipstick in, but when you put it on, it went pink.
Yeah. So
I'd put this lipstick on trying to look older and get out there on the basketball court with these older women. God, the reverse process would be a bit more difficult today to reverse the aging, but never mind. But that's what gave me the fun thing. I had good coaches, but no pressure, license to kill, and I think it's come with me right through my life.
Yeah, love that. It sounds like you had quite a busy childhood, did you?
Oh, yeah, I did. Well, unfortunately, my dad passed away when I was 9, and you live in the country and your mother doesn't drive a car. So, you've got to do things. I used to bike a mile to the station and catch the train to Gore for netball training. So when I made an East and Southland team, but it took me to the first New Zealand tournament in my life in 1949, and that was here in Dunedin. And I looked at the top players. I was down a lower grade, goodness knows what. But I looked at the top players and thought, oh, goodness gracious, it'd be marvellous to be out there. But then my mother shifted to Dunedin a year later, 1950, because my brother and sister were here in Dunedin, and that's where it's gone from there.
Uh-huh. I expect there wasn't much of an international scene for netball in the middle of the century.
No. We were looking at rugby playing all over the world, and here was netball in New Zealand. We played 9-a-side, which were different rules to the rest of the world. So I played 15 years for Otago, but the highest I could get all of that time till 1960 was to play for the South Island team against the North Island team at the end of tournament, because we couldn't tour because there was no one to play. And so the first World Netball Championship was coming up in England, and I admire those marvellous women administrators who made the decision to change netball in New Zealand from 9-a-side to 7-a-side. You've got to remember, every netball court in the country had to change because the 7-a-side was a smaller court. And everyone was going, oh, but we'll lose players.
Yeah.
Where will those other girls go that aren't on the court?
Yeah.
But they were women before their time, and they took us to the first World Championship in 1963. I mean, they only changed the rules to 7-a-side in 1959.
Wow.
And I was in that New Zealand team that toured Australia in 1960. So we were new kids on the block. You know, and any time at that time when we played Australia, we had to play on grass. Horrible stuff for a defender, for goodness sake. Defence. Well, defence is marvellous because you use your sound, you hear other people, or you scratch your feet near a shooter and get her upset. You know, lots of things you could do with, but you used your sound, and on grass, it just sucked the energy out of your legs.
So
you're jumping and everything, you know. Horrible stuff for a defender anyway.
Talking about your playing career, is there one game you remember as a highlight above all others?
Oh, of course. In 1960, we were a great team because we were breaking ground. We were making history. We were going somewhere. And we played our first test match against Australia in the centre court in Adelaide, the tennis open pavilion. We played outside, of course, all the time. And we played there, crowd in the grandstand, great stuff. Oh, I could have jumped up and grabbed the moon, actually, but no, that would be my best game. But that was a great tour because we felt we were really breaking ground here.
Yeah. What position were you?
Oh, I was goal defence.
And looking forward to your coaching career, were you quite a strategic player? Did you think deeply about the game?
Yeah, I think my basketball background made me into that sort of coach. I coached a junior side for Otago earlier, and I was obnoxious. I was yelling at the kids, and I wanted to get out there and do it. And I made a decision then that I was going to be on the sideline making them do the work. You know, when you coach and your team's reasonably successful, you've got to be so careful that they don't get complacent. And I used to sort of think it was clever if you could change your strategy just a little bit when you're successful, because the other coach is coaching to what you're doing.
Yeah.
And when you change your tactics slightly, you've ruined their coaching session. And I used to love that. I used to love getting in the other coach's head and seeing what opportunity they had to bring people on that we were going to master. And no surprises probably was my motto. Know the umpire. You know, you could get an umpire. We got lots of international umpires, had to be neutral, but they weren't quite up to standard.
Yeah.
But they had the whistle for the hour, and the girls had to understand that. You can't fight the umpire. If they're pulling you up for something, they're right.
Yeah. So, how did you get the New Zealand job?
Oh, well, that was a surprise, actually. I retired, and I said I would never go on the netball court again.
Yeah.
Once you retire, because I'd seen older players retire and go down the other side, but they were shrewd, but they weren't prepared to do the fitness. You know, you really if you've played at the top level, your mind still wants you to do it, but as you don't train, your body isn't up to it, and you get a bit mean.
Yeah.
So I coached Otago, and I went to a national championship as selector of a team for the islands, which was in 1972. And when we got to tournament, my youngest son, I had three boys. My youngest son was just a baby. I had a very close friend who was going to look after him for the week I was going to be away. And when we got to national championships, the Netball New Zealand executive said, we've made a bit of a mistake because one of those selectors has to be the coach. This is interesting. So I rang Murray, my lovely husband, my late Murray, who was marvellous, put up with me for years,
Yeah.
and said, what do you think I should do? And he said, if you don't take the opportunity now, it mightn't be there when you're ready.
Yeah.
And that was the start of it. I did 72, which was an islands tour of second, third and fourth grade New Zealand side. It was preliminary, but it was interesting. And it was, baptism by fire, but a lot of officials came with us, and we were doing coaching in schools at the same time. And then in 73, another team was to go to Australia, and it was an under-24 New Zealand team. The New Zealand executive decided they didn't want to take senior players there. They wanted to grow some other people coming up for the World Championships in New Zealand in 75. So I took that team as well, and that virtually, those two lower coaching New Zealand jobs got me selected for the first year I did New Zealand, 1974.
And went through for, I think, 15 years after that. There's a couple of really big highlights. The 1979 World Netball Championships. Mm-hmm. Tell me about these ones.
That was a toughie. You got to remember in those days, and I think I'm rabbiting on a little bit, but there was no substitutions. You had to play 12 players, and they had to play for the game, unless they were really badly injured or ill. And we went to Jamaica to acclimatise because we were going to play outside in Trinidad in the heat of the day. Some of the games were going to be 3 o'clock. So Jamaica, we started training at 8 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon, and brought the training times into the heat of the day. Yeah. So by the time we got to Trinidad, we were fairly okay. Trinidad was a difficult country because economically it was stressed, a lot of poverty, but the government had put millions into a complex for people to play in. And they were determined they were going to win this World Championship, no doubt about it. But the surface was lake hole, so it's a green surface that people play tennis on in those days. But also, tennis doesn't play in the rain. But it was the rainy season, and netball had to play. Gosh. We had to play outside. So it got very, very difficult. It was a complicated system. Round robin, it ended up with 3 teams winning, and that was really, really a challenge. And there was a couple of teams doing sort of naughty stuff that wanted to win. At that tournament, I was probably pushed to the max.
Huh. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, what happens is, all right, it was a rainy season. This was the type of thing that was happening. Yeah. We were to play at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it rained, and the people would try and squeegee off the courts. But we had to play at 11 o'clock at night because there was no extra day. Oof. But the naughty stuff was that people hung on to skirts, or Margaret Matinga was shooting a penalty, and they're standing on her foot, pressing hard on her other foot, sort of thing. And, the umpires weren't that skilled. You couldn't sort of say something because you were held ball. You're only allowed to have the ball in your possession within 3 seconds, not for 3 seconds. So you really have to do better than it. And there was a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of umpires a little bit using whistle to suit themselves too.
Oh, gee. Okay.
And so I actually got the team down and said, right, this is where I'm at. If the skills of the game don't win, I don't want to be here.
Huh.
And that was a tough time. I was feeling bad.
Yeah.
Because when a player retaliates, they're worse than what's been done to them.
Yeah. And I imagine that's one of those times where you've got to be quite firm with the athletes and say, hey, here's what we're going to do, and we're not going to fight back.
They knew that. You've got to look after your own game. You cannot get emotionally involved with a player. Once you get like that, you've lost your perspective and you've lost your team unity because you're there fighting something for you.
Well, you must have done something right because you won the tournament.
Oh, yeah. Well, we joint winners, but that was good.
That's funny to look at by 2023 standards, that you could have a World Cup and it's round robin and there's 3 teams tied on points, so that they share the gold medal. Yeah,
I know. But then the 3 teams with their flags were to march into the stadium at the same time. But no, Trinidad ran ahead and wanted to go in first. And, after we finished the last game, this was the sort of thing. We beat Trinidad in the last game by about 5 or 6 or something. It had been wet and it was awful, and it was a mammoth effort. But, the scorers and timekeepers and them, they spat on us and threw stuff at us and that. And we'd been friendly with them all the time, but, they lost their perspective. They wanted their country to win. And we were sitting in the team bus ready to be police escorted. All the teams had to have police escorts, and all the teams stayed in the Hilton Hotel. The girls never got out of the. We were sitting in the bus waiting to leave, and people are banging on our bus and annoyed with us. It just it's good for you.
So that's 1979. 1983, you head to Singapore, come runner-up, and then I get the feeling that by 1987, you're really heading into that tournament with the team exactly how you want it.
Yeah, how they wanted, which was marvellous. Some were carried over from 83 that was felt, mind you, I want the people listening to think playing outside in Singapore in 3 in the afternoon isn't my favourite time to do things, but it was pretty mixed, that tournament.
Yeah.
But in 87, the team knew really where it wanted to be. I mean, we did a lot of our fitness sessions with schools of the game activities, and we could do an hour of work that I wouldn't have to say anything. I mean, different players took different sections, and if anyone, instead of catching the ball, patted it to the ground and then picked it up and was dying to have a wee rest, the others didn't want to work with that person. They knew exactly where they wanted to be. It was a marvellous group to have.
And we talked a bit about strategy earlier and being unpredictable, and you chose in that tournament in 1987 not to play Margaret Forsyth and Margie Martenga together, and arguably one of our greatest shooting combos. Can you tell me about that decision?
Well, they were the greatest shooting combo in the world for many, many years, and that broke my heart. But I knew they could not play together at that tournament because any international player who becomes predictable has a limited future. And the two of them knew exactly what they were going to do, nod, nod, wink, wink. But that was the era where everyone was videoing the games and reading players and knew exactly what people wanted to do. And also, it becomes an Achilles heel because you're used to doing that, and then somebody doesn't let you do it. You're not as good as you used to be. So that broke my heart, but I think it paid off. And, when you have a team that's doing well and you introduce one less experienced player, it lifts the mettle of all the others because you've got to watch your back. You've got to not help the other person, but just be wary that they may not just read the game quite as well or something. it lifts the whole feel of the team. You know what I mean? You can't just be complacent and think, oh hum, another throw off. You've got this strange little body out there that you're not sure what they're going to do. It's fun.
Did you get a bit of stick from the media?
No one knew very much about it, really. We played, in those days, in Glasgow, we played 11 games outside in 13 days. And the same with Trinidad. We played 12 games in 13 days. So, we were pretty much under the pump. And I admire Dame Nolene today for the fitness, but my lot, they had to be fit to survive, because you've got to remember it wasn't till 83 that we could sub players. So they were on for the hour regardless. So you had to be fit, otherwise you were yesterday's person.
I'm speaking with Dame Lois Muir. Was that the highlight then for you as coach, winning that 1987 tournament?
Oh, it's a great feeling. I think it's like the players. You worked and you're that relieved at the end, you sort of slide down the wall, you know what I mean? But, no, winning world championships is fun, but for me, the strong young women that I coached have gone on to be stronger women and leaders, and a lot of them have stayed in the game, which means they enjoyed it. It was fun, but it was hard work.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sports History NZ, and a special thanks to Dame Lois Muir for being my guest. Sports History NZ was produced by Melita Tull, Ayana Piper-Helian, Sally Ward and Sam Hollis. The podcast was put together by Justin Gregory. Tim Watkin is RNZ's executive producer of podcast and series. And there are plenty more amazing stories just like this one from our sporting past for you to follow and listen to. You can find them at Apple Podcasts, iHeart, Spotify, or wherever you found this podcast.